To elucidate the rebirth of Southern football and properly outline the magnitude of this gripping 1-2 college football showdown, CBS turned to the nation's highest office to introduce the 2008 SEC championship game. The president was called upon to present to a rapt citizenry Alabama versus Florida. Well, it was actor Dennis Haysbert who had played the president on the television series 24.
So, it seems all that is old is new again. The lessons of the bear and the head ball coach have been passed on to this current generation of players. And they know a team is a unit. And in order to become champions of the SEC, the unit must work as one.
CBS stood him near a desk and an American flag and had him talk about Bear Bryant and Steve Spurrier. Dressed in black with his regal bearing and authoritative baritone voice, he was basically telling you that SEC football was back, that SEC football was now America. He was right. Maybe more than anybody in college football knew, although you kind of had an inkling.
It's top-ranked Alabama against second-ranked Florida, and we welcome you to the SEC Championship presented by Dr. Pepper.
We are 2 seasons removed from the start of episode 1, where we focused on the 1-2 showdown at the end of the 2006 regular season between Ohio State and Michigan. It's been just 750 days, but it feels like we're in a new era of college football. And we are. On a list of the people who flipped the switch, who turned Southern football back on, who helped kick Northern football to the curb, and who established what would become the new normal in college football, Nick Saban is the clear number 1, and Urban Meyer is probably number 2. Because coaching matters. And among all the things the South did to beat the North during this period of college football, finding aggressive, relentless coaches to lead their best programs was among their most obvious advantages.
This is the 25-year winter, how championship college football went dormant in the North. This 5-part podcast series will dive into the failings of Northern college football and the dominance of Southern college football in the modern era. I'm Bill Landis.
I'm Doug LeMaurice, and we're the co-hosts of the Kings of the North College Football Show. This is episode 2, and it's all about coaches. Talent always lived in the South, but the right coaches had to recruit it, cultivate it, and win with it. Others had done it, obviously. Hello, Bobby Bowden. But the combination of the lightning of Meyer, a flash across the sky with his spread offense and early burnout, and the thunder of Saban, the rumble of defensive dominance that emanated from Tuscaloosa for nearly 2 decades, they were the storm. Florida won 61% of its games in the 3 seasons before Meyer arrived in 2005. They won 81% of their games and 2 national titles in 6 seasons with Meyer. Alabama won 55% of its games in the 10 years before Saban showed up in 2007 through 4 disastrous head coaching hires. The Tide won 88% of its games in 17 years of Saban and 6 national titles. Yup. Coaching matters. In our 25 years of Northern dormancy from 1998 to 2022, when the North won just 2 national titles, the South outcoached the North. They attracted more coaching talent, probably because they paid more and won more, a self-fulfilling prophecy of talent, money, and victories. And if the wheel broke, the SEC was happy to fire you and move on to pay the next guy who might win. The 12 SEC teams who were part of the conference the entire time between 1998 and 2022, they averaged 5.4 head coaches in those 25 years. The 11 Big Ten teams averaged 4.3 head coaches. The SEC was less patient. While beating the Big Ten 58-41 in head-to-head matchups during those years. Only 5 of the 11 Big Ten programs had at least 5 coaches in those 25 years. All of the SEC teams except Georgia did that. That's 11 of 12 teams with 5 coaches or more. And what was Georgia defined by before hiring Kirby Smart? solid winning, but underachieving. How very Northern of the dogs. High bar, little patience, big money. The Southern way. That can help you land guys like Meyer and Saban. Hey, Bill, is firing coaches a good thing?
I think it can be fun to mock the SEC for its quick trigger and the bills that it racks up, paying the buyouts for the coaches that it fires. But I also think there's something to the idea of comfort being the enemy of progress. So do I think it's a good thing? I'm not sure it's that black and white. But I do think it's probably better to err on the side of action if you have the idea that something isn't working the way it's supposed to. It doesn't take much to fall behind if you let something that's amiss fester.
The South is all about that action. Gene Chizik at Auburn, natty in 2010, fired after 2012. Ed Orgeron at LSU, natty in 2019, fired after 2021.
Kirk Ferentz at Iowa, 26-25 during a 4-year stretch from 2011 to 2014 with no bowl wins. He's still the head coach at Iowa and entering year 27, despite a racial discrimination lawsuit brought by former players, an investigation after 13 players were hospitalized following an off-season workout, and nepotism issues over making his son the offensive coordinator.
Man, that's a lot of issues. He must have a load of national titles, right?
Not quite, no. Good record overall, though. Again, I'm not sure what's better or worse, but the North is typically more patient.
Back to the SEC showdown. This 2008 game was the first meeting between Alabama's Saban and Florida's Meyer, and it was the first 1-2 showdown in the history of the Southeastern Conference. Quote, I love the history of the Southeastern Conference, Meyer said the day before this game. When I heard that, I was a little surprised. It was time to get used to this. Saban, for instance, had another 4 SEC 1-2 showdowns coming his way before he retired. In fact, these two teams and coaches would play this same 1-2 game in the SEC title game the following year in 2009. For now, Meyer would win this Saban matchup 31-20 on the way to another national title. Saban avenged that with a 32-13 Bama win the next year, a loss so intense that Meyer thought he maybe was having a heart attack hours after the game. He wasn't. Oh, and Meyer loving the history of the SEC, big fan, eh? How'd that happen? Why don't we trace the deep Southern roots, the SEC lore that must have been passed down through the generations to these two coaching giants who were fueling the rise of Southern college football dominance? One of whom didn't live in the South until he was 37, the other until he was 38. Yeah, the South took our coaches. 30 years before this game in 1978, Meyer was a teenager in Ashtabula, Ohio, and Saban was the defensive backs coach at West Virginia, fresh off stops at Kent State, his alma mater, and Syracuse. 20 years before, in 1988, Meyer was the outside linebackers coach at Illinois State after graduating from Cincinnati and serving as a grad assistant at Ohio State. Saban had just moved from coaching jobs at Ohio State, Navy, and Michigan State to take his first NFL job with the Houston Oilers as an assistant, a brief 2-year Texas sojourn. He only took that job with the Oilers because he wanted the head coaching job at Kent State and didn't get it. 10 years before, in 1998, Meyer was the receivers coach at Notre Dame, and Saban was the head coach at Michigan State, where he upset Ohio State during the regular season to keep the Buckeyes out of the first BCS title game. And now they were burgeoning SEC kings with a combined 45 years of experience coaching Northern football. There are plenty of reasons why the North lost coaching battles during this quarter century, but it starts here with what if they could have kept these two guys home? We're going to tell the stories now of how the North missed out on the heydays of Saban and Meyer. This is valuable because despite the talent edge in the South, I think the success of Meyer at Florida and Saban at Alabama could have been replicable in the North, at least to a degree. These guys were special. Meyer has the third best winning percentage in major college football history behind Newt Rockne and Frank Leahy, two Notre Dame coaches. Saban's 7 national titles are the most in college football history. That they could have done something similar at Notre Dame or Penn State or Oregon or Michigan, I don't think that's crazy. Meyer proved it. After winning 81% of his games and 2 national titles at Florida in 6 years, he won 90% of his games and 1 national title at Ohio State in 7 years. And he was 22-2 in 2 seasons at Utah, which got him the Florida job. So, Bill, this isn't crazy, right?
Would they have added the same players that they did at Alabama and Florida?
No, at least not quite.
No. And the South is still the talent base of the sport, as we'll show in episode 3. And the South was perhaps willing to, let's say, pursue talent more aggressively than Northern schools at the same time.
But there's no doubt Saban and Meyer were elevators.
Agreed.
And they were great at recruiting. Ron Zook, Meyer's predecessor at Florida, was also a great recruiter. His last full class at Florida in 2004 was ranked number 7 by rivals. But Meyer's recruiting class at Florida in 2007, number 1.
And then Alabama had the number 1 classes in 2008 and 2009 as Saban got his first full groups in. The previous 2 years, Alabama's classes were number 10 and number 11.
8 straight years from 2007 to 2014 with either Florida or Alabama corralling the number 1 recruiting class. Part of that can be attributed to their personal powers. Can we agree they could have and would have been great in the North as well?
I think so. These guys were already pretty ambitious and forward-thinking. Meyer was running a national recruiting operation out of Gainesville, Florida. His 2007 class included the top players from the states of Florida, South Carolina, Indiana, Maryland, and Connecticut. Saban immediately consolidated power in Tuscaloosa, demanding alignment when so many other coaches and programs were brought down by internal strife and warring booster factions. Alabama's major donor group paid off Saban's $3 million home in 2013 just to be nice. They said they wanted to keep the boss happy. As we'll see, they picked the South because they felt that was their best chance to win at the highest level. Regional talent and SEC desire were attractive draws. But if the North had kept them home, I think we once again maybe aren't doing this podcast. In our 25-year period, Saban and Meyer account for 10 national titles, 9 of them in the South. So staying North, yeah, I think they would have made a difference.
Okay, let's break some hearts then with the stories of how Saban and Meyer went south. Bill, you start with Meyer.
Urban Meyer went 17-6 in his first 2 years as the head coach at Bowling Green in Northwest Ohio. Then he went 22-2 in his next northern move at Utah. His Utah contract had 3 schools he could leave for without paying a buyout: Notre Dame, Michigan, and Ohio State. That clause suddenly mattered on November 30th, 2004, when the Fighting Irish fired Tyrone Willingham. In the midst of what would be a 12-0 season with the Utes, Meyer became an obvious candidate. The candidate. I have great respect for that university, Meyer told reporters the day after Willingham's firing. That's the reason it's in my contract. I think a lot of people look into it more than what it is. More than what it is? It's obvious what it was. Here's a line from the book Urban's Way by Buddy Martin about what transpired in the days after the Notre Dame job had joined the Florida job, which had come free a month earlier as a possible landing spot for Meyer. At one point during the night, Urban told his family that he would be taking the Notre Dame job. I wanted to go to Notre Dame, Meyer admitted, but my family wanted to talk about going to Florida. Meyer has talked about this a lot over the years. A Midwestern Catholic who spent 5 years as a Notre Dame assistant, he was of course intrigued by the idea of returning to South Bend. It's where his heart was. But his head said Florida. Better talent, theoretically easier recruiting near campus as opposed to the national recruiting required for Notre Dame, And bottom line, Florida was more ready to win in Meyer's mind, though the records for the Gators and Irish over the previous 3 years were basically the same. This is how Meyer reflected on the choice in a 2021 interview on Colin Cowherd's The Herd.
The bottom line in the coaching profession is you don't have time to build programs anymore. You better get it going right now. Ron Zook was a previous head coach of Florida. I evaluated the rosters the best I could, and I felt Florida had the better roster. Ron Zook, like I said, tremendous recruiter. They had Chris Lee coming back. They had Chad Jackson, Bubba Caldwell. I did my homework, and I thought, you get one swing, and I think the best chance to win is going to be at the University of Florida.
Florida AD Jeremy Foley was aggressive in his pursuit, but so were Notre Dame AD Kevin White and President Father John Jenkins. Meyer admitted issues about facilities, the schedule, and getting players into school were addressed in a way that made him think Notre Dame was serious. But the Gators were more ready. The Irish moved on to Charlie Weiss, who went 19-6 in his first 2 seasons, proving that missing out on Meyer was huge miss. He went 16-21 in his final 3 seasons before giving way to Brian Kelly. Oh, and by the way, Meyer has said that while he was at Bowling Green, Michigan State expressed interest in him, but the Spartans said they wanted a Tier 1 coach. So they hired Louisville's John L. Smith, who went 22-26 in 4 years.
This is going to be a pretty thick what Michigan State could have been file.
They did wind up with Mark D'Antonio eventually, who won 11 games 5 times in 6 seasons between 2010 and 2015. That's pretty amazing. And Notre Dame eventually got to Kelly, who made a national title game and 2 college football playoffs while averaging 9.5 wins a season over 12 years. 2 rugged, winning Northern coaches there in D'Antonio and Kelly.
Yeah, and then Kelly left for LSU, which reminds me, are we here to lament the North losing out on the greatest coach in college history or not?
Sorry. Lament away.
When Cleveland Browns defensive coordinator Nick Saban got hired at Michigan State in 1995, starting at $135,000 a year, he had pursued the job with gusto. That's according to the 2016 book Saban, The Making of a Coach by Monty Burke. At his introductory news conference, Saban said he was committed to staying at Michigan State for, quote, as long as it takes to be a championship team. This isn't to call out lies told in coaching news conferences. That's its own 20-part series. But it speaks a bit to the opportunity here to keep Saban North. He did love East Lansing. Over time, Burke paints a picture of Saban feeling underappreciated. He got tired of playing second fiddle to Michigan. There was a disagreement or misunderstanding over a bonus payment. Saban had talked to NFL teams over the years, but in 1999, he was in the midst of his best season in year 5 in East Lansing, a top 10 finish that included wins over Notre Dame and Michigan. And now LSU was calling. Then just with a single national title in 1958, LSU wasn't definitively a better job than Michigan State. Saban saw the player talent in the South, but Burke wrote that in his interview with LSU decision makers, Saban asked, why can't you guys win? Yet Saban, restless, undervalued, was ready to listen. And Michigan State was too ready to lose him. In listing his shortcomings at Michigan State after his departure, bowl losses, basically a 500 record his first 4 years, shocking losses after stunning wins, Detroit newspaper columnist Mitch Albom asked, where exactly is the genius coaching in that? The soon-to-be legend was headed south, and the Northern reaction was don't let the door hit you. Sigh. Double sigh. But days after Saban took the gig in Baton Rouge, an MSU trustee named Joel Ferguson and interim athletic director Clarence Underwood both told Burke, the author, that Saban called them saying he'd made a mistake. LSU felt Saban's hesitation, believing that a push by the MSU president could have gotten Saban to stay to begin with. Now, Saban wanted to come back to Michigan State. Underwood said he was crying. The Northern boy wanted to come home. Saban changed his mind back within a day. The Tigers kept him. He won a national title at LSU, left after 5 seasons for the Miami Dolphins, stayed in the NFL 2 years, then landed at Alabama for 17 seasons. The Louisiana media had called Saban a Yankee when he was hired. Now, he was an SEC guy. But what if Michigan State had managed to tie those heartstrings to a stack of money? What if the Spartans had understood what they had? LSU made Saban the 3rd highest paid coach in college football at about $1.35 million per year. He was making $700,000 at Michigan State, so he got a raise, a big raise. But consider, Saban left in 1999. He was 9-2 in year 5 when he departed. In 2021, Michigan State head coach Mel Tucker, then in year 2, got a huge raise when the Spartans were 9-2. His salary jumped from $5.5 million a year to $9.5 million a year on a 10-year deal. Why the new deal? Because LSU was sniffing around. Michigan State ponied up to keep their successful 49-year-old coach with Northern roots. They made Tucker the 2nd highest paid coach in the nation, behind only Nick Saban. In 1999, they did not do the same to keep their successful 48-year-old coach with Northern roots. Tucker coached only 16 more games at Michigan State after his raise, going 9-7, and he was fired over allegations of sexual harassment. Keep Tucker, lose Saban. Triple sigh. What if Michigan State had accelerated its commitment and employed a similar strategy with Saban 2 decades earlier? LSU sniffs, Michigan State answers. Maybe you wouldn't mark down Saban for the equivalent 7 national titles in East Lansing, but you would have liked to see him try. Or maybe Michigan State gets him to stay for the time being, and when the Ohio State or Penn State or Michigan job opens later, Saban builds his dynasty in the North. Instead, he went 17-4 against power conference Northern teams in his 22 years in the SEC, and more than tripled the number of Northern national titles by himself. So the North had to try to win big in other ways, like with a little ingenuity.
My goodness. Are you related to Meyer and Saban or something? This is a lot of teeth gnashing over 2 guys.
Important guys.
Yeah, important guys, but it's not like the North was letting its players wander around in cornfields. They did have coaches.
Okay, I get your point. And the Associated Press National Coach of the Year award in our 25-year period was 14 South, 10 North, 1 border. And of those 10 Northern winners, 4 were eventually fired. And 2-time winner Brian Kelly of Notre Dame left for LSU because he thought he had a better chance to win there.
Incorrectly thought he had a better chance to win there.
Well said.
So we have to get into some other coaches in the North who were trying, who were innovating, and who for some reason weren't quite getting over the top. Can I make up a stat?
Sure.
All right. I'm calling this the National Championship Minimum Offensive Threshold.
Oh, that's snappy.
It's fine. Here's what it is. 19 of the last 25 national champions, from Oklahoma in 2000 through Ohio State in 2024, have scored at least 35 points per game and averaged at least 6 yards per play. 19 out of 25. That's pretty good, right? It's been even more consistent since Auburn's title in 2010, with 14 of the last 15 champions, including the last 9, meeting this threshold. Even Saban's teams, primarily defined by their defensive prowess, met this threshold 4 times in his 7 national championship seasons. 2 of Meyer's 3 title teams, 2008 Florida and 2014 Ohio State, also made the cut. That stretch of 7 SEC national titles in 7 years, 4 of those teams did it. Is that a large enough sample size to consider this an essential characteristic of any team trying to win a national championship?
Sure, I guess.
That was mostly rhetorical. So here's the point. Either by way of immense talent and firepower or offensive innovation or both, these champions, almost all of them Southern, were getting it done on offense. And the North was perhaps not doing enough to keep up, at least not a big, important chunk of the North. I think we understand why the North lags behind the South in talent accumulation. If you don't, stay tuned for episode 3. One way to counterbalance that, push the envelope schematically. Some Northern coaches got that. Lavelle Edwards' BYU teams threw it a lot, long before doing so was in style. Kansas State had some electric offenses under Bill Snyder. Purdue had its basketball on grass run under Joe Tiller. Chip Kelly developed as an offensive innovator at New Hampshire before bringing the fast-paced blur offense to Oregon. Rich Rodriguez developed the spread read option at Glenville State in West Virginia. He mastered it for a couple of seasons as the offensive coordinator at Tulane and then at Clemson, and then he brought it back to West Virginia University. You know what some of those guys also did? They met the national championship minimum offensive threshold. Snyder did it 4 times at Kansas State, including the 2012 season when K-State was a BCS contender. Kelly did it all 4 years he was the head coach at Oregon. Rodriguez did it in his final 2 years at West Virginia, including the 2007 season when the Mountaineers squandered their chance to play for a national championship. For Kansas State, West Virginia, and Oregon, offensive innovation made up for talent deficiencies and pushed programs that were not at the time regularly considered championship contenders into contention. What if the spirit of guys like Snyder, Kelly, and Rodriguez was more pervasive in the North?
Ooh, sounds like you're getting ready to tell a story.
I've got one. There was a brief spark in Evanston, Illinois. Boy, did Northwestern have something cooking there for a minute. And its win against Michigan on November 4th, 2000 should have set off alarm bells for the rest of the Big Ten. Randy Walker and Kevin Wilson, then the head coach and offensive coordinator for the Wildcats, had come together from Miami, Ohio in 1999, keen on playing the type of 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense that was prevalent in the Midwest. Except they didn't have the players to make it work at Northwestern, nor were they confident they could get them. So they pivoted. They studied a little bit of what Tiller was doing at Purdue, but Walker didn't want to throw the ball that much. Wilson was intrigued by the shotgun, no-huddle spread stuff that Rodriguez was doing at the time as the offensive coordinator at Clemson, so Northwestern zeroed in on that. Turns out it fit their personnel to a T. It all came together in that win against Michigan. 654 yards, 322 passing, and 332 rushing. An absolute classic shootout in which Northwestern came back from being down 28-10 to win 54-51.
Got to give the system some credit on here. I mean, this is a team that could barely move the ball last year.
Over an offensive barrage. Pump fake. Kustok didn't get the man open, but now he runs it inside the 5. Wants the end zone, dives. Touchdown, NU, touchdown.
What a play. What a play.
That win helped Northwestern claim a share of the Big Ten championship that year. The Wildcats led the conference in scoring at 38.5 points per game, while finishing second in the league in rushing, 4th in passing, and 4th in yards per play. They narrowly missed the national championship minimum offensive threshold, by the way. That win against Michigan was one of the most singularly important games in college football history for what it did across the sport, primarily opening the eyes of coaches like Kelly, then at New Hampshire, and Meyer, then just starting at Bowling Green, to the power of the spread offense. Both coaches studied that Northwestern team and then implemented what they learned into their own offensive ideologies. I talked with Meyer about this for a story I wrote in 2019. Here's what he said, quote, "We saw it work in the Big Ten, and that was shocking. That caught everybody off guard." 2 seasons after that Northwestern triumph, Wilson left to be the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma. Walker tragically died of a heart attack in June 2006 at the age of 52 and was succeeded by a defensive-minded program legend in Pat Fitzgerald. That magic of the 2000 Northwestern season was fleeting. Meyer, meanwhile, he concocted a Frankenstein offense out of what he learned from that magical Walker-Wilson run in 2000. He added a pinch of Rodriguez's read option scheme and a dash of Joe Tiller's passing attack. He was also influenced by his mentor, Scott Linehan, who had learned the spread offense at the foot of Dennis Erickson. Erickson's another son of the North who was born in Washington, played at Montana State, and got his head coaching career started with stints at Idaho, Wyoming, and Washington State before winning a pair of national championships as the head coach at Miami. You're welcome, South. Meyer conceived of the offense at Bowling Green, enhanced it at Utah with Alex Smith as his quarterback, and then he injected it with rocket fuel at Florida. All of that Northern offensive ingenuity combining to ignite a Southern powerhouse.
So what's your beef here?
That highly successful progressive offense was already right there in the Big Ten. Could nobody else in that conference make it work for themselves? Instead, Kelly took parts of it with him to Oregon, then in the Pac-12. Meanwhile, the rest of the North had to watch Meyer steamroll college football with it at Florida. I'm putting a lot of blame on the Big Ten here, if that's okay. See, in the North, we did have Kansas State, Oregon, and West Virginia kind of doing their part. I'd argue maybe even maximizing what they could be and getting close to breaking through. The Big Ten, not so much outside of Ohio State. Let's look at some more NCMOT data. I swear we'll come up with a better name. In the North, Oregon has met the threshold the most since 2000, doing it 13 times. A run that didn't start until 2008, Kelly's second season as offensive coordinator for the Ducks. Ohio State has done it 12 times, but all but one instance has come after Ohio State finally brought Meyer back home to the North in 2012. West Virginia has done it 5 times, Kansas State 5 times, and Notre Dame 5 times. Nebraska, Penn State, BYU, Washington, and Cincinnati have done it 4 times. Are you noticing anything in that list of schools? Where is the Big Ten?
Bill, aren't Oregon, Nebraska, Penn State, and Washington Big Ten teams?
Well, yes, but Oregon and Washington just joined, and I'm not letting the Big Ten siphon off credit for what those programs were doing in the Pac-10/12. Nebraska has only done it once since joining the Big Ten in 2011. Penn State did it once between 2000 and 2016, and by the way, hasn't done it since 2019. Some Big Ten teams have figured this out more recently. Indiana did it a couple of times with Kevin Wilson as head coach in 2013 and 2015, and then did it again in 2024. Michigan did it in 2018, 2021, and during its 2023 national championship season. But I'd argue that the Big Ten's consistently best teams, Ohio State before the arrival of Meyer, Penn State before 2016, Michigan before 2018, Wisconsin, which has done it twice ever, Iowa has done it once, and Michigan State's done it once. I say these teams haven't met the threshold as much as they should have. 5 current Big Ten teams, Illinois, Maryland, Northwestern, Purdue, and Rutgers, have never done it. Of the current SEC members, only Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and South Carolina have failed to meet this threshold since 2000. 9 of the current 16 SEC teams have done it at least 5 times, with Oklahoma 15 times, Texas 12 times, Alabama 11, and Georgia 8 leading the way. Would some more offensive ingenuity have gotten those best Northern teams over the hump more? What happened at Northwestern makes me think yes. And that wasn't the only team other Northern programs could have learned from. What if the air raid had taken flight in the North? And not just the North, but a part of the North that has been defined by everything other than exciting offensive play, for the most part. I'm talking about Iowa. Hal Mumme was right there, tinkering with new ways to throw the ball at Iowa Wesleyan and confounding NAIA defenses. But when you think of the air raid now, you probably think of college football in Texas. Mumme eventually broke through for a chance in major college football at Kentucky. His top offensive assistant, Mike Leach, then went on to an assistant job at Oklahoma before taking the head coaching job at Texas Tech. Why do they have to go south for their aerial roadshow to grow wings? Is there an alternate history where Mumme or Leach ends up coaching at Iowa? It's not that Kirk Ferentz has done a bad job there. Better yet, Leach at Iowa State as the enigmatic, pirate-loving, ball-chucking in-state foil to Ferentz? Could you imagine? Find 2 rival coaches more diametrically opposed in their ideologies. Now, Mummy is no son of the North. He was born in Texas. He played college football in New Mexico and Texas. He started his coaching career as a Texas high school offensive coordinator. In fact, in 5 decades of coaching from high school to college to the XFL, Mummy was only in the North for those 3 years that he was at Iowa Wesleyan. He's a Southern coach.
But it's not like stealing a coach from outside of your region is unheard of, right?
We'll get to that. During Mummy's 3 years in the North, Mount Pleasant, Iowa incubated one of the most important offensive experiments in the history of the sport. Mummy's Iowa Wesleyan teams were among the most prolific passing offenses at any level of college football. It was sitting right there, 49 miles from Iowa City and 170 or so miles from Iowa State in farther flung Ames. The point isn't that Iowa and Iowa State could have done something transformational for Northern football had either of them seen the merits of Mummy's passing-oriented offenses, except that's kind of the point. More generally, the air raid was sitting right there in the middle of Big Ten country, the heart of the North, some might say. Yet Mummy's show headed south in order to take on a new life. The author S.C. Gwynn chronicled Mummy and the rise of the air raid offense in his book The Perfect Pass, American Genius and the Reinvention of Football. In it, the story goes that Mike Leach was so smitten with the palm tree-lined campus of Valdosta State in Georgia that he convinced Mummy to take the head coaching job there in 1992. Gwynn detailed in his book that Mummy had been on the lookout for other coaching jobs as he sensed that, despite his success, he was on the outs at Iowa Wesleyan. He applied to, among other places, South Dakota State. He didn't think that Valdosta State would want to hire him, except Valdosta State did want to hire him, unafraid to take a risk on a coach from Iowa with a funky offense. Leach did help grease the wheels. According to Gwynn, Leach sent to Valdosta State, along with Mummy's resume, a highlight clip of Iowa Wesleyan's 48 touchdown passes from the 1991 season, set to the tune of the song Small Town by John Mellencamp. Mellencamp, by the way, Indiana native, son of the North. So Mummy's offenses carved up teams at Valdosta State, and that got him the head coaching job at Kentucky in 1997. It was then Kentucky athletic director C.M. Newton who saw enough in Mummy to bring the air raid into major college football. It didn't really work, but don't you admire the swing? Leach would eventually show the viability of the air raid in major college football while at Texas Tech and then later at Washington State. He died in 2022 while the head coach at Mississippi State. Here's another offensive innovation that the North didn't quite embrace. The run-and-shoot offense, spread out, 4 receivers, 1 running back, option routes, heavy passing. It had a brief heyday in the NFL. It helped power prolific college offenses at places like Houston and Hawaii. Yeah, that was first conceived by an Ohio high school football coach named Tiger Ellison, and it was later adapted to be more palatable for college coaches at higher levels by a guy named Mouse Davis, who coached in Oregon. Did this game of Tiger and Mouse bear much fruit for Northern college football? Not really. Aside from Davis's success at Portland State, their run and shoot never gained much traction in the North, at least not at the highest levels. But it was close. It could have. There was a brief window. After a successful run as an Ohio high school coach, Ellison was hired as an assistant under legendary Ohio State coach Woody Hayes in 1963. Except Ellison's initial bio in the 1963 Ohio State team guide makes no mention of the run and shoot offense, and Hayes certainly didn't adopt it.
You're blowing people's minds with Woody Hayes running the run and shoot in the 60s.
Yeah, he's probably not the right guy to use as my example. Offensive innovation did exist in the North. It just didn't make enough headway to help even the score when the sport started to shift at the advent of the BCS. Kelly's offensive inventiveness propelled Oregon to national championship contention, and then he left for the NFL. Kelly's successor, offensive coordinator Mark Helfrich, he flamed out after 4 seasons as the head coach in Eugene. Had Kelly stayed at Oregon, it's quite possible the Ducks could have done more to stymie the onslaught of Southern success that defined college football for 25 years. And with that, perhaps Kelly's coaching tree could have grown more branches in ways that would have more widely benefited the North. As things stand now, the only member of Kelly's coaching tree that find any sustained success as a college coach is current Ohio State head coach Ryan Day, who played quarterback for Kelly at New Hampshire and then coached under him in the NFL. All apologies to Scott Frost, of course. Perhaps the same could be true for Rodriguez had he not left West Virginia for Michigan after the 2007 season. That's a decision that derailed his coaching trajectory and one he's since expressed regret over making. Rich Rod in Ann Arbor was a disaster. However, saying that Rodriguez's offense has failed at Michigan is a bit too broad of an assessment of what happened. Did he ever quite replicate the offensive prowess that he had at West Virginia? No. Michigan finished last in the Big Ten in scoring during his first season with the Wolverines, but then it jumped to number 4 the following year and again to 3rd in 2010, which was his final season with the program. The larger problem? His defenses stunk. They finished 10th, 8th, and 11th, respectively, in what was then an 11-team league. Furthermore, Rodriguez didn't find the right quarterback to run his offense until Denard Robinson took over as the starter in 2010. The electric sophomore rushed for 1,702 yards, threw for 2,570, and was responsible for 32 total touchdowns. Rodriguez's lack of success at Michigan had far more to do with him being a poor culture fit, NCAA improprieties, and hard defense than it did the inability of his offense to work at a traditional blue blood. Still, it was unequivocally a swing and a miss from a Northern power on one of the game's offensive innovators. And it's here where I'll freely admit that simply running more spread offenses or dialing up the air raid is not some kind of panacea to solve the North's shortcomings relative to the South. It's not like every Southern program was running the spread or doing something that qualified as pushing the envelope offensively. And there were teams in the North that were doing it but couldn't break through. I just ask whether it was happening enough, especially when you see what a little imagination did for Meyer at Florida, despite early criticisms that the offense he ran at Bowling Green in Utah would have been unbecoming of a mighty SEC program. Here's more from the talk that I had with Meyer about his offense in 2019. Quote, "That first year we struggled and they said it will never work with great players. Then everyone in the SEC started doing it, even Alabama. Yes, even defensive mastermind Nick Saban eventually realized that he had to do more than run the ball some, throw it a little, and bludgeon teams with his defenses to stay on top of the sport. So he evolved, riding Steve Sarkisian's spread run-pass option offense to his last national title in 2020. That year, the Crimson Tide finished second nationally in scoring and yards per play, and had 3 players finish in the top 5 of the Heisman Trophy voting, including the winner, receiver Devontae Smith. That Alabama team certainly met the national championship minimum offensive threshold qualifications. Here are a few teams that didn't. The 2012 Notre Dame team that lost 42-14 to Alabama in the BCS title game. The 2015 Michigan State team that was shut out by Alabama in the college football playoff. And the 2018 Notre Dame team that lost 30-3 to Clemson in the college football playoff. Not NCMOT material. No. That's not quite it. Maybe number of required touchdowns. Help! Oh, hey, that's North.
The H in North being help, that is too good, Bill. That is too good. But are you angry about these coaching could-have-beens?
More frustrated. I think we're going to be saying something like that a lot during this series. The South justifiably had an edge on the North. The North fumbled every opportunity to catch up. And then the perception of Southern superiority grew even beyond the reality.
That seems like the kind of cycle that could cause certain people to change jobs, believing Southern grass is greener, whether that's entirely true or not. Dripping wet from his post-game celebratory Gatorade bath, Bret Bielema was handed the 2012 Big Ten Championship trophy by Big Ten Commissioner Jim Delaney and held it above his head. Confetti flying, smile wide, some of his Wisconsin players on the victory stage holding roses in the air.
If Coach could come up here, Bret, I'd like to present the championship trophy to the Wisconsin Badgers, our representative to the 2013 Rose Bowl.
Bielema was raised in Illinois, had played at Iowa, and was the defensive coordinator at Kansas State and Wisconsin before being handed the reins in Madison at age 36. He was all Badger, and he was big time. For Delaney, who loved the Rose Bowl like a child, the opportunity for the Big Ten champ to represent the conference in Pasadena was sacred. and Wisconsin was about to do it for the third straight time. That had never happened to the Badgers before, but Bielema had led them there again. In his 7 years as head coach, Wisconsin had arguably been the Big Ten's second-best program. And from that stage in Indianapolis, Bielema thanked the fans as a 42-year-old Wisconsin legend in the making.
We're going to enjoy tonight, enjoy this. I appreciate all the fans for coming out here to Little Madison East. Thank you for everything and on Wisconsin.
Hey, congratulations.
It wasn't on Wisconsin for Bielema. It was on to Arkansas. 4 days later in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Bielema donned a different shade of red for his first public woo pig suey at his introductory news conference as the head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks.
Pig suey, Razorbacks. All right, not bad. Congratulations.
Bielema had abandoned his football roots. The draw? The 10th best team in the SEC. A program still reeling from firing coach Bobby Petrino 20 months earlier after he got in a motorcycle accident and lied about his mistress being with him on the bike. The cleanup operation for a second-tier wannabe who still hasn't won an SEC title in 33 years in the conference. The coach of the 3-time Big Ten champs. What made that possible? It wasn't pigs. It was cash. And it was the aura of the SEC and also the cash.
Why leave a good thing in Wisconsin, and how much the possibility to pay your assistants more had to do with that decision?
It was, I appreciate the question and understand it. I should, and first and foremost, I left a great place. I left a place that gave me my first opportunity as a head coach. One of the things that I really believe in as a coach, if you can leave the place in a better place than where you were, you should feel good. And we gave them 3 straight Big Ten championships, never been done before. I would love to just say thank you to Coach Alvarez, my AD, that gave me a tremendous amount of guidance. And it was a very difficult decision, something I didn't just think about. I've had some opportunities come my way the last 2 years probably that made me begin to think a little bit. And I got such a tremendous university and respect for Wisconsin. But the opportunity to be in the SEC, it's just something I really wanted to do.
Bielema made $2.64 million at Wisconsin in 2012, which ranked 17th in the nation among publicly available coaching salaries and 5th in the Big Ten. The deal at Arkansas paid him $3.2 million a year, plus the school paid nearly $2 million to cover his buyout. But as you heard earlier in the question to Bielema, the real story was around paying his assistants. That may seem like a sub-level salary issue, but it was a driving force for Bielema and an indication of the North-South difference. In the days after his hiring, Bielema said several times he expected the money for his assistant coaches to nearly double. USA Today's salary database had the Badgers' assistants at $1.77 million for 2012. The next year, the site reported the Arkansas assistants at $3.2 million, which ranked 10th in the nation, pretty close to doubling. Bielema's offensive coordinator at Arkansas made $550,000. His Wisconsin OC the year before had made $265,000. Defensive coordinator Chris Ash followed Bielema from Wisconsin to Arkansas, and his salary jumped from $267,000 to $550,000. Arkansas Athletic Director Jeff Long knew the deal, saying the money was key to landing the new coach. Quote, resources are obviously very important because you heard Coach Bielema talk about some of the things he wasn't able to do at Wisconsin. And so this provided him an opportunity to do that. So we're excited to be able to do that. Bielema told the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette that, quote, Wisconsin isn't wired to do that at this point. He told the Wisconsin State Journal that without the major jump in assistant money, he would have stayed in Madison. Quote, if I had the same salary pool here that I had at Wisconsin, I would have never left. But he did leave. That didn't mean that Arkansas immediately won or that Wisconsin completely fell apart. The Hogs went 3-9 in Bielema's first season, and Wisconsin went 9-4 in its first year under former Utah State coach Gary Anderson. But in this North-South coaching discussion, as the South landed the two most successful coaches of the era in Nick Saban and Urban Meyer, and as the North fell a little short on turning ingenuity into major wins, it's obvious that money also mattered. And the South set the market. This is just how it worked. The SEC established a threshold for salaries, and the Big Ten and the rest of the North maybe tried to keep up, or maybe didn't. Even when Michigan's Jim Harbaugh overtook Saban as the most well-compensated coach in 2016, the South still held 14 of the top 20 spots among highest-paid head coaches. Again, Wisconsin survived. Bielema went 29-34 in 5 years at Arkansas without a top 25 finish. The Badgers went 54-14 in the same period, finishing the top 25 every year and in the top 10 twice. That new Wisconsin run, it included losing defensive coordinator Dave Aranda, who after 3 seasons in Madison was hired away by LSU, which almost tripled his salary from $522,000 to $1.3 million. By the time Aranda helped LSU win the national title in 2019, he was making $2.5 million as the highest paid assistant in college football. It was a pattern. Succeed in the North as a coach, decent chance the South comes calling with a check. And if you throw enough money around, you might eventually get your money's worth. In 2013, the 5 highest paid assistant coaching staffs were all in the South: LSU, Alabama, Clemson, Texas, and Auburn. Ohio State was 6th, then 1st in the Big Ten. Second in the Big Ten was Michigan, who ranked 14th nationally. To close the 2013 season, Ohio State faced Clemson in the Orange Bowl. The Tigers' offensive coordinator, Chad Morris, was making $1.3 million, one of 3 million-dollar coordinators in the country, along with LSU defensive coordinator John Chavis and Alabama defensive coordinator Kirby Smart. At $550,000, Ohio State offensive coordinator Tom Herman made 42% of what Morris did. And Ohio State athletic director Gene Smith said he didn't anticipate a $1 million assistant at Ohio State anytime soon. Quote, "But who knows what the future holds," he added. Ohio State's first $1 million assistant didn't come until 5 seasons later. But by 2024, Smith said he went berserk with Ohio State assistant salaries in pursuit of a national title. Of the 9 assistants nationally who made at least $2 million in 2024, 5 were from the North, and 2 were Buckeyes. Defensive coordinator Jim Knowles at $2.2 million, and offensive coordinator Chip Kelly at $2 million. The money paid off with the national title. And when Knowles wanted a raise, it was provided elsewhere, not by an SEC school, but by another Big Ten school chasing a title, as Penn State made Knowles the first $3 million assistant in college football. The North has started to catch on. But as a rule, the South just pays more. Whether it's commitment or desperation, even as the Big Ten has closed the gap on the SEC, the South still has the edge. According to 2024 data from USA Today, SEC head coaches averaged $8.1 million in salary. The Big Ten averaged $6.8 million. The ACC $5.8 million, and the Big 12 $4.9 million. On its list of assistant coach salaries, there are, prepare to have your mind blown, 78 assistants who made at least $1 million in 2024. 78. Now, we have to remember some schools don't make their salaries public. Among them, Notre Dame, Penn State, USC, and Miami. But of what we do know, the breakdown was 46 assistants in the South, 31 in the North, and 1 from a border school. So it's closer, but a gap remains. And there's a headline I've been staring at for weeks. I've kept it as a tab open on my computer because it's such a reminder. It's from the newspaper The Tennessean in the fall of 2009, and it reads, "Vols lead nation in pay." Not Alabama, not Texas, not LSU. Tennessee paid its football coaches the most. Among first-year head coach Lane Kiffin's quotes about Tennessee's staff pay, "I really think you have to spend money to make money." Tennessee went 7-6.
So what's your issue with this then? Are you bemoaning the fact that the North didn't spend enough on coaching mediocrity? Kiffin bailed on Tennessee after a year to go to USC, where he got fired on an airport tarmac in the middle of year 4. Would you rather he did that as the coach at Minnesota?
No, but as with a lot of this stuff, it's about trying. The South tried more and paid more and was willing to solve problems or try to solve them with money. And there were more than a few examples of them luring Northern coaches with that.
So there's a brain drain that you don't like either.
Right. It's Meyer and Saban from the North and Bielema as a guy with a Hawkeye tattoo on his leg taking the Arkansas job. It's also Les Miles from Ohio winning a title at LSU and Bob Stoops from Ohio winning a title at Oklahoma and his brother Mark becoming Kentucky's all-time leader in wins. How did 3 Stoops brothers, including one-time Arizona head coach Mike, all grow up in Youngstown, Ohio, play at Iowa, and never become Big Ten head coaches?
Okay, I see what's happening here. Let me pile on. Dan Mullen, he's part of that college football New Hampshire mafia that features Chip Kelly and Ryan Day. He spent 13 years as an SEC head coach at Mississippi State and Florida. Dave Doran, he was born in California, but he grew up in Kansas and he played at Drake. He was all North in his coaching career through being the head coach at Northern Illinois when North Carolina State came and poached him. He's won 57% of his games at NC State and is the program's all-time leader in coaching wins. It's not great, but there are probably some below-average Northern teams that would kill for that. Dave Clawson is similar. He's from New York, coached mostly in the North. Then he jumped from the Bowling Green head coaching job to the Wake Forest job, where he's 3rd all-time in program wins. And Oklahoma coach Brent Venables is leading a blue blood program new to the SEC after spending a decade at Clemson, winning 2 national titles and establishing himself as maybe the best defensive coordinator in the sport. He's a former linebacker and linebackers coach at Kansas State.
More. Gene Chizik played at Florida, but he was the Iowa State head coach before he took the Auburn job and won a national title. Brian Kelly left Notre Dame for LSU, and when Alabama needed to replace Saban, the Tide hired a South Dakota native in Kalen DeBoer, who reached the national title game at Washington and had never in his life coached south of Carbondale, Illinois.
I think you're freaking out again.
Of course I am.
It's okay. It's okay. I did look at some of these brain drain numbers to see how warranted your panic was. It's actually not quite as bad as you think. You're making it sound like every SEC coach grew up in a snowsuit. In 1998, the first year of the BCS, the percentage of power conference head coaches from the North and the South was even at 41.3% each. The rest were from border areas. In 2023, it did jump to 49% of the coaches from the North and 33% from the South. So admittedly, a little more drainy, but I don't think it's quite that drastic.
Okay, here's one thing I keep coming back to for every part of our North-South discussion. Imagine if something happened the same way in reverse. Flip the roles.
So instead of a 3-time Big Ten champ Wisconsin coach leaving for Arkansas, could you imagine the 3-time SEC champ Texas A&M coach leaving for Purdue?
First of all, can anyone imagine Texas A&M as a 3-time SEC champ? And also, exactly, can you imagine an SEC star coach immigrating north?
No. Although former Purdue linebacker Kevin Sumlin was once one of the 10 highest paid coaches in the country at Texas A&M.
It never stops. North guys go south, and it seldom went the other way. I looked at all Big Ten head coaches hired in our 25-year period, and really, the only major hires where the North pulled somebody from the South were James Franklin, a Pennsylvania native, going from SEC bottom dweller Vanderbilt to Big Ten blue blood Penn State, Iowa pulling Hayden Fry, a tried and true Texan, away from SMU and North Texas State, and Ohio State getting John Cooper, a Tennessee native who played at Iowa State, to come north from Arizona State. There's no Bielema equivalent. The only time the Big Ten gets a major SEC coach is when they get fired. Jerry DiNardo got fired at LSU and landed at Indiana. Ron Zook got fired at Florida and landed at Illinois. Meyer burned out at Florida and quit before he got to Ohio State. And then there's Bielema. He's back where he belongs, leading a rebound at Illinois because he got fired at Arkansas. He just got a contract extension in 2025 and a raise that will make him $7.7 million a year in Champaign. Pretty sweet. But 9 SEC coaches still make more. One of the reasons Bielema is of such interest is because now that he's back to his roots, he has become one of the staunchest defenders of Northern football. When Lane Kiffin, now at Ole Miss, tried to make a resume case on social media, complaining that the Rebels weren't ranked higher in 2024, Bielema responded with facts that credibly claimed Illinois' resume was even better. And then Illinois beat South Carolina in a bowl game, and Bielema got in a war of words with Gamecocks coach Shane Beamer. No one in the North stirs up the SEC like Bielema right now.
He looked like he was ready to shove Beamer in a trash can. Man, that guy loves Northern ball. He is Northern ball.
But when he left for Arkansas, one of the reasons he thought it would work is that a Northern guy going south was so common in his mind. He knew the history.
The thing that probably intrigued me more than anything as I've watched over the years, the SEC, there's a lot of coaches that have my type of background that have had success, not only just growing up and being a part of it, but coming in from a Big Ten coaching background early in their career, some of the principles and things that they've done. And I'm excited because to work with the caliber of the athlete that the SEC can bring and what we can bring here to the University of Arkansas is very exciting. No apprehension.
He's basically saying, let Northern coaches get their hands on Southern players and you're gonna win.
In his case, he was wrong. But when it comes to getting players from the South, yeah, that's a good plan for winning.
And that's what we'll dive into in episode 3. Talented players, where they were, and how the North and South tried to acquire them. The 25-Year Winter, How Championship College Football Went Dormant in the North, is written and researched by Doug Lesmerises and me, Bill Landis. Michael Henahan is our producer and composer.
Ryan Nanny and Stephen Godfrey are our executive producers. To catch our daily college football show, search for Kings of the North College Football on YouTube.